this fixing the intelligence on one point. This one point in intelligence means fixing one's intelligence on following the Krishna's instructions in Bhagavad Gita, or the instructions of the spiritual master. Always considering what Krishna wants me to do. Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita what to do, how to act as a soul. So always following these instructions. And what not to do is many-branched intelligence. An intelligence based on so many desires. And a great variety of desires, these material desires which can not be satisfied. It's not really possible to satisfy material desires. It's always false expectations. Because expectations of material desires, they are an invention of the mind. Because then, of course, Arjuna has asked in the last section, what are the symptoms of such a transcendentalist? How does he walk? How does he sit? So Arjuna wants to know, how can I recognize such a person? That Krishna, the first thing he says is, Prajati yata kaman sarva partamanogatan. An transcendentalist, he has given up all these desires for sense gratification, because they are an invention of the mind. Dukkes anutvikmasikas yuvigatave. Ja, die dragen bij akkoordaan. Dat stita dermoni uchate. A sage, a Krishna conscious sage, is one with freedom of attachment, fear and anger. It came to that state because he is not disturbed. It's not disturbed when there is distress, and is not happy when sense gratification comes. If sense gratification comes and it's a hindrance, an obstacle in one's devotional service, a devotee will not accept it. So he has described the symptoms of a transcendentalist. And now, after that, Krishna speaks about the importance of control of the mind. Yoga means control of the mind. Yoga without control of the mind, that's cheating. It's meant to control the mind, yoga. And that's, therefore, one cannot let the mind go, the senses go, everywhere they want, and to give the mind enjoyment. That one who strives, who concentrates on the object of the senses for sense gratification, he cannot control his mind. And control of the mind is necessary for performing yoga. And Krishna starts to speak about that in this last section. This last section he will speak about the process of fall down, the process of giving the senses unrestricted satisfaction. That's the process of fall down. What's going to happen when you do that? Then Krishna will tell Arjuna that to control the mind you have to follow the regulative principles of freedom. Our regulative principles. Yeah, positive and negative restrictions, prohibitions, and things to do, the chanting, and four regulative principles. And then after that, he will speak about the situation of a pure devotee. What's the consciousness of a pure devotee? How does he deal with material desires that enter into the mind? And he will give us an idea of the Uttam Adhikar and a glimpse of Bhakti at the end. So this section, this second chapter, gives us different yoga systems at the same time. That in the beginning Krishna speaks about jnana, that's jnana yoga, development of knowledge and attachment at the same time. And then Krishna explains Buddhi yoga, that's karma yoga. Karma yoga means acting with the knowledge that I am a spirit soul, acting for the pleasure of Krishna. And that culminates at the end in pure devotional service. But the second chapter gives only a glimpse of that. So Krishna will make a contrast here in this part. He will at one side he will speak about a self-controlled yogi, and on the other side he speaks about those whose senses are completely going out of control. And such a person whose intelligence who gives his senses free enjoyment, such a person, he will lose one's intelligence and fall down. Therefore Krishna says to Arjuna, you should control your senses and follow the regulative principles of freedom. Practice Krishna consciousness. And by doing so, you will become happy and get the mercy of the Lord. If you don't do that, there is no question of happiness, and there is no question of peace, Krishna says in this section we will go through. So we'll start with reading text 60. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind, even of a man of discrimination, who is endeavoring to control them. So, I read the last paragraph of the Srila Prabhupada's commentary, that Krishna consciousness is such a transcendentally nice thing that automatically material enjoyment becomes distasteful. It is as if a hungry man had satisfied his hunger by a sufficient quantity of nutritious eatables. Maharaj Ambarish also conquered a great yogi, Durvasa Muni, simply because his mind was engaged in Krishna consciousness. Savai mana Krishna pada vindayo chamsi pakuntu gunam sarnane. So, at one side here, the verse says that, yes, the senses are very strong. You cannot conquer them. They are practically unconquerable. And even a man, an intelligent man, he wants to control them, but he cannot control them. At the end of the purpose, Srila Prabhupada says, for a devotee this is not a problem. He just engages his mind and senses in the service of Krishna, and they are automatically controlled. No problem. So these are two different aspects. So the way to control the senses is to engage them in Krishna's service. Like you have a naughty child that's always crying or is doing naughty things, but then if you can catch the mind of the child and engage it with mind and senses in something, then it will be quiet, will be engaged. I don't know if there are mothers here, and it may not always be successful, that attempt. Anyway, that's the principle, to engage the senses. That this story of Vishvamitra. Vishvamitra was a Brahmin. It's a whole story. But Vishvamitra was a Kshatriya, but he wanted to become a Brahmin. Because Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, one should do one's own duty and not doing the duty of another, because that is very dangerous. And we have seen how it is destroyed Dronacharya, who tried to do the same thing. He was a Brahmin and he wanted to be a Kshatriya. I think Vishvamitra, he wanted to become a Brahmin. Wanted to become a Brahmin, and that, of course, that was in Satya Yuga, or Treta Yuga, I'm not sure. But they had a very long lifetime, 100,000 years. And he was meditating for 10,000 years to control his senses. And 10,000 years is a long time. And during that time, by his austerities, he built up by his tapasya, he built up immense power. And when Lord Indra in heaven sees that someone gets so much power, he becomes worried. Thinks, I'm going to lose my job here. Then he makes a plan to deviate this yogi from his austerities. And he sent Menaka, heavenly society girl, and Apsara, very beautiful. And Apsara came before Vishvamitra, and Vishvamitra was meditating. His eyes were closed. But then Menaka just moved his ankle bells, and in the mind of Vishvamitra his mind told him, you are now a great yogi. Don't be afraid, just take a peek. And he opened his eyes just for a moment, and the rest is history. But Vishvamitra did not give up. And he started again 10,000 years to control his senses. And the same happened. Lord Indra became worried. And he went to the Apsaras and said, ask Menaka, can you go again? And she went again. And she did the same thing with her ankle bells. But then, when he heard that, Vishvamitra, he became very angry, because he remembered his fall down from last time. Became very angry, and he opened his eyes, and by his tapasya, fire came from his eyes and burned the body of the Apsara in a second. But becoming angry is also a fall down. It means not controlling your senses. Again, a failure. But Vishvamitra did not give up. Decided again 10,000 years of tapasya. Indra became worried. He went to the Apsaras. But the Apsaras said, we have seen what happened. Not this time, we won't go. But anyway, then Lord Brahma came down and gave him the sacred thread after 30,000 years of tapasya. In ISKCON we get second initiation after 6 months. Of course, comes a little difficult. You have to follow ISKCON disciple course. You have Bhagavad Gita certificate, and it becomes more difficult. But a devotee has no problem with controlling his senses senses are constantly engaged in the service of Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada also, in a few quotes, he refers to Vishvamitra Muni. There's a lecture in New York, 1966. Our mind is so strong and uncontrolled that even though we artificially try to control our senses, usually we fail, just like Vishvamitra Muni failed. Yatato yapi kauntya purusasya vipashita. Vipashita means a very learned man, not an ordinary man, but a learned man trying to control his senses. Yatato yapi kauntya purusasya vipashita indriyani prama. The senses are so strong that this is a serious command that one should not sit in a solitary place, even with his mother, with his sister, with his daughter. Why? Now, Balavan indriyāhyāmo vitvansam apikarshati. The senses are so strong that the temptations arise even for a learned man. There's another quote. Yatavadi, since the time Mama Sita, I've engaged my life, my soul, my consciousness in the service of the lotus feet of Krishna. This verse is given by Yamunacharya. He was a great king, and kings in general are licentious, but he became a saintly devotee. From his personal experience, he said, since I have engaged my mind in the service of the lotus feet of Krishna, Yadavati nama seta Krishna padaravinda. Nava. It is not hackneyed. Those who are spiritually realized will find that serving Krishna brings enlightenment. In this material world, everyone wants to enjoy, and it becomes hackneyed. Punas sarvita. Therefore, you are disappointed. But if you are engaged in the service of Krishna, you will find great spiritual encouragement. That is spiritual. If you find it hackneyed, then you must realize that you are not yet serving spiritually. You are serving materially. But if you feel new energy, then you know that you are serving spiritually. That is the test. Your enthusiasm will increase, not decrease. Now, verse 61. One who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control, and fixes his consciousness upon me, is a man of steady intelligence. So that's the solution. We restrain our senses, means we follow the four regulative principles. That's the basis. And we keep the senses full under control. How do we do that? We engage them in Krishna consciousness, in the service of Krishna. By that we fix our consciousness on Krishna. And such a man is a man of steady intelligence. Now, in 62 and 63, the process of fall down is explained. That what's happening when you meditate on things in this world for sense gratification. It's two verses. I will read both of them. Dayato visayapam sanghirte svachayate sangha sanyayate kama krode visayate. Krodavavati sama smiti vibra smiti bhamsadudhinya sugunasa pranashati. While contemplating the object of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. From anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, the bewilderment of memory. And when memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down in a material question. So, this is the process of a fall down. Now, this process of fall down it's like everyone in the publicity world, all those to do with publicity, they know this principle, how to attract the minds of people. That you see advertisement, maybe you have cigarettes or whatever, or today you don't find this publicity anymore. Many countries it's forbidden, but before. Or a big car, you see the big car and a half-naked woman. What's doing the woman there? It's clear to attack the mind of the man. Because then they will look at the publicity. But that's very dangerous, that business for devotees. Letting your mind meditate on so-called beautiful things in this world for enjoyment, or things that taste nice, or So it's like a fish in the water, and you have a fisherman. Fisherman puts out his line, and out the line there is how do you call it?
Bait.
A bait. Yeah, the bait. And the fish comes and sees the bait and thinks, now I'm going to enjoy. It's going to the bait and it's going to enjoy, and up from the moment it tries to taste it, it's lifted out of the water by the fisherman. The fisherman takes him, cuts him open, all his inside out, and puts him on the frying pan. So that's the result. You think you are going to enjoy, but you become fried. That's the way our material nature works. And that it's like in the 24 spiritual masters, in the 11th canto, we have the example of the moth. The moth is going to the light, the fire, and then enters into the fire and it's finished. It's killing us, this business. It's a very dangerous business. Because in the previous verse, 61, it is said, one who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control and fixes in his consciousness upon me. That's the first part of the Sanskrit. That's the business of the sadhaka. Follow the regulative principles, controlling one's senses. And for the Krishna conscious devotee, engaging the sense in Krishna's service. And then such a man is known of a man of steady intelligence. That's the one who has attained the siddha, the perfection. Now, artificial renunciation is very difficult, practically impossible. Because we have eyes, we have senses, automatically you have contact with things in this world, and to try to give up all this enjoyment. I don't want it, I renounce. But it doesn't work really. And even if one has the power, it's very troublesome. There's always distress. It's so difficult to artificially renounce that this kind of renunciation is falgu vairagya. Falgu, I think, means false renunciation. Vairagya, false renunciation. That's, I want to renounce that. Yes, I renounce my enjoyment. I renounce my house, my wife. I renounce everything in this world. everything but I and mine, I renounce it. But this renunciation is incomplete, is false, because nothing is ours. It belongs to Krishna. That one can say, I renounce the house of my neighbor. Everyone will think this person is a little mad. So we are all a little mad when we think this is mine. Because it's based on this mine, I mine, that we say I am renouncing. But renunciation is not really factual from the transcendental perspective. Because you can only renounce what belongs to you, but nothing belongs to us. So the devotee is in full knowledge, he knows everything belongs to Krishna, that's meant for Krishna's service. The devotee sees a beautiful flower in the garden, and he thinks, oh, it would be nice to offer this flower to Lord Jagannath. So he thinks in a different way. He has knowledge to whom everything belongs in this world. But impersonalists, they try to avoid material objects. They cannot enjoy life. And they have a little agitation, and they fall down, like Vishwamitra. But little agitation, they fall down. But the devotee, he knows that everything belongs to Krishna, and he knows how to use everything for Krishna. So he offers everything to Krishna. After it has been offered, he will enjoy. That's the devotee's enjoyment. Yeah, of course. I think most of us join because prasadam, no? Many devotees in their story, when they come to Krishna consciousness, prasadam is an important role. But this is the way how to control the senses, engage them in Krishna's service. And there is no other way to get rid of this frustration, of this bewilderment of memory, of anger. Because that's what Krishna said in the beginning of this, a few verses before, that a transcendentalist gives up these material desires. Because these material desires, they are based on an imagination of the mind. Like Srila Prabhupada gives an example here, that like someone makes a plaster form of a person, that by this white plaster they make like statues with it. And then, but first when the artist is making the plaster, it doesn't look well. But then the artist starts to paint it, and it gets and to work on it, and it gets a nice form. Then it becomes a beautiful statue, very beautiful and colorful. But inside it's just plaster. It's the outside. That's like this human body is the same. Outside, very nice, but when you look at the inside, that's something else. Don't look at the inside, just at the outside. So we can understand how it is illusion. Only the outside is it's like a bag with different substances, bones, fat, 90% water that's this bag. But outside it's nice, but inside it's horrible. And that's a big illusion, and that's Maya. Maya changes forms, and outside very nice, but inside horrible. So now, after explaining this process of fall down, Krishna will explain how to be happy in this world and how to be in anxiety, not happy. That most people know that last point. But the first point, how to become happy. That's text 64 and 65. But a person free from all attachment and aversion and able to control his senses through regulative principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. For one thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. In such satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is well established. So, here Krishna explains to Arjuna, the one who is servant of Krishna, that he is the master of his senses. One who serves Krishna. Because he only wants to satisfy Krishna, not the body. He wants to satisfy Krishna, and therefore, by acting in that consciousness always, he can renounce even the even undesirable things in Krishna's service. So this consciousness is the mercy of Krishna. And it can be achieved even if we are attached to the sensual platform. In the Jnani schools, you can only enter the Jnani school when you are a celibate. You have to give up married life, celibate. And Ashtanga Yoga, the yoga schools, the same thing. You have to be celibate. But in Bhakti Yoga, that doesn't matter. Because the process is so strong that one can overcome this sensual attraction by this engagement in Krishna consciousness. Yeah. So there is no need to go to the Himalayas. That we can practice just where we are and add Krishna consciousness. But let's see, the quote of Srila Prabhupada speaks about that, going to the Himalayas. The yogis and others are trying to control the senses by force. I shall go to the Himalayas. I shall not see beautiful women. I shall close my eyes. You cannot control your senses. You don't need to go to the Himalayas. Remain in Los Angeles and use your eyes to see Krishna. You are better than a person who goes to the Himalayas. You don't need to change your position. Engage your ears, hearing Bhagavad Gita as it is. You'll forget all nonsense. Engage your eyes in seeing the beauty of the deity, Krishna. Engage your tongue in tasting Krishna Prasad. Engage your legs in coming to the temple. Engage your hands working for Krishna. Engage your nose in smelling the flowers offered to Krishna. then your senses will be controlled and perfection is assured. You don't have to control your senses forcibly, but you have to change the engagement, the status. That will be very helpful. So, this is the happiness we derive by engagement in Krishna consciousness. But if we don't engage in Krishna consciousness, what's the result? Distress. Notice, Krishna says. That's verse 66. Nasti buddhayuktasna nasayuktasya bhavana nasabhavayata santir asantasya kuta sukam. One who is not connected with the Supreme in Krishna consciousness can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? So first condition to be happy is peace. Krishna said before, you have to tolerate material nature. If you tolerate, then you can remain peaceful. But if you don't tolerate, then you become entangled. And anxiety comes. So that's very important instruction. And, this was 66. And now, many people, they want peace. They want peace, but they do not want to control their senses. That's not going together. If you don't want to control your senses, you will not obtain peace. Control of the senses is done best in devotional service, by engaging them in Krishna's service. Because this control of the senses is not an easy thing. Krishna confirms it, especially the mind, in the 6th chapter, that will also be discussed in more detail. As a strong wind sweeps away a boat on the water, even one of the running senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. Therefore, O mighty aunt, one whose senses are restrained from their object is certainly a man of steady intelligence. Here, Srila Prabhupada speaks about this, looking for peace. Everyone in this material world is looking for peace, but they don't want to control the senses. For example, if you are diseased and the doctor says, take this medicine or follow this diet, but you refuse, you take whatever you want against the instruction of the physician, so how can you be cured? Similarly, we want to be cured of the chaotic condition of this material world. We want peace and prosperity, but we are not willing to control the senses. So, now, Krishna will make comparison between the devotee and those who don't want to control their senses. Yanisa sarva bhutanam tasyam shagati samyami yasyam shagati bhutani shanisha pashato mune. For this night for all beings is the time of awakening for self-control. And the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective stage. So, this Srila Prabhupada makes a point here and he says, two kinds of intelligence. There's the intelligence to give pleasure to the senses. And you can use your intelligence to give pleasure to Krishna. Two ways. Everyone in this material world is looking for peace, but they don't want to control. No, it's the next one. There are two kinds of intelligence. One kind of intelligence is to apply the senses for unrestricted enjoyment, and the other is to apply the senses in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Now suppose one has given up all material enjoyment, and one is engaged in transcendental service of the Lord. Materialists think such a person is crazy to have given up all material enjoyment and be engaged in something so nebulous. The materialist sees the spiritual person as losing out in life's enjoyment. And the spiritual person is sad that the materialist is destroying himself in material enjoyment, taking no interest in spiritual life. That I remember in 94, I was in Ghent in the Namhata Center. I was together with a devotee who was running the center. His name was Bhakti Sastri. And we had our morning program. We were getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. But we were in the middle of the city. It was summer. We were getting up at 4 o'clock. And we pushed open the window. And then on the other side of the street there was a nightclub. We opened the window and they opened the door of the nightclub. And they opened the door of the nightclub and the first thing that came out was a lot of smoke. And then you could see people coming out, not walking straight. One by one they came out. So this was the end of their day. It was the beginning of our day. But they have, I think the day after their enjoyment, they will have a horrible day. But we were engaged in Krishna consciousness. Very happy time. Now, text 70. Now, in these last verses, Krishna is going to describe the Uttam Adhikar, the person in Krishna consciousness who has reached the highest perfection. And this is an important verse so it shows how a person in Krishna consciousness is always peaceful. How is that possible in this world? Material modes, we memorize this verse, Prakriti Kriyamani Kunai Karmani. Kunai. Everything is done by material nature, by these modes, these gunas. These gunas, they enter our consciousness. Even if you are a pure devotee, the gunas are going to enter your consciousness. And the consciousness which is prevailing in the environment is entering. And many times, if you are in an environment where people are striving all for sense enjoyment, it's coming in your mind, even if you are a pure devotee. How does a pure devotee deal with that? Apoyanam achala pradistam samudranapa pravishanti tatvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sasantim apnoti na kami. Person is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled and always still, can alone achieve peace, and not a man who strives to satisfy such desires. That means a material desire pops up in your mind. Can be of many reasons, because if we are in our previous lives, we have got many material desires. What's the characteristic of a material desire? You cannot satisfy material desire. It remains unsatisfied. It's this process of fall down. There's frustration, anger, so many problems. So we must all have many unfulfilled material desires from previous lives. And they are stored in the chitta. It's experience from previous lives and this life, which forms our ahankar, our false ego, our experiences. And some we are conscious, some not. Some are coming from previous lives. Krishna is in our heart. And he knows all, as Paramatma, he knows all these material desires. He may not be conscious of it, but the samskar, the impressions of these material desires, is in our subconsciousness. So Paramatma decides, okay, we take such an unfulfilled material desire, and he brings it in the mind of the person. And he says, like he says, you tried to fulfill it last life, it didn't work out. You can try again. But then, when one becomes a devotee, and one sees that material desire coming into his mind, if one is a devotee, he sees, oh, that's a material desire. That's very dangerous to fulfill that. And by spiritual power, if you follow the regulated principles and you chant, you get spiritual power. You push that out of your mind. And one is not disturbed by it. So like many rivers enter into the ocean, all these desires may come in one's mind. One pushes them out by spiritual strength. That's the pure devotee. But if one is not pure, then that material desire comes up into your mind. And you think, oh, that's my desire. Yes, that's me. My likes and mislikes, that's my life. That's me. And one starts to run after it and try to fulfill it. And one thinks, yes, it will work, but it never works out. So such a person is not intelligent. Krishna devotee is intelligent. He sees the danger of this material desire. Of course, we are not conditioned, most of us. And most of us are also not fully Krishna conscious. We are somewhere between. And then sometimes the desire comes up in the mind, and then what to do with it? We cannot completely neglect it. Then it's the question to use it in Krishna's service. That's another thing. But that's not really explained here in this verse, but there's something we will see later. Dovetail our desires with the desire of Krishna. And that's a dovetailing technique which will be explained in the 3rd chapter and further on. So, Krishna conscious person is satisfied in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Therefore, he can remain steady like an ocean and attain peace. Although material desires are present, he has lost all inclinations for sense gratification. It's text 70. I read the purport because this is a very important verse. Although the vast ocean is always filled with water, it is always, especially during the rainy season, being filled with much more water. But the ocean remains the same, steady, it is not agitated, nor does it cross beyond the limit of its brink. That is also true of a person fixing Krishna consciousness. As long as one has the material body, the demand for the body for sense gratification will continue. The devotee, however, is not disturbed by such desires because of his fullness. A Krishna conscious man is not in need of anything, because the Lord fulfills all his material necessities. Therefore, he is like the ocean, always full in himself. Desires may come to him like the waters of the river that flow into the ocean, but he is steady in his activities and is not even slightly disturbed by desires for sense gratification. That is the proof of a Krishna conscious man who has lost all inclinations for material sense gratification, although the desires are present. Next verse. A person who has given up all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, and has given up all sense of proprietorship, is devoid of false ego, and is devoid of false ego. He alone can attain real peace. So here we have 4 conditions to obtain real peace, Krishna says. Giving up desires for sense gratification, live free from these desires, give up all sense of proprietorship, no mind, and avoid of false ego, not acting for the pleasure of the body. Then you can attain peace. But we are living entities. A characteristic of a living entity is desire. If one does not desire, it's like a stone. We all desire. So desire is a characteristic of the living entity. But we have to change the quality of our desire. Real desireless means I do not want it for sense gratification, but I want it for the satisfaction of Krishna. That's the real thing. 71. We don't have to kill our desire. Desire is a constant companion of all living entities. Because we are alive, we are desirous. Inanimate things have no desire. If our desires are material, we engage in sense gratification. But if we engage our senses in serving Krishna, then He will free us from all material desires. This is where true happiness lies. Now, we have the last verse of this section, 72. That is the way of spiritual and godly life. After obtaining which a man is not bewildered, if one is thus situated, even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. Purport. One can attain Krishna consciousness or divine life at once, within a second, or may not attain such a state of life after millions of births. Strong statement. It is only a matter of understanding and accepting the fact Katvanga Maharaj attained this state of life just a few minutes before his death by surrendering unto Krishna. Nirvana means ending the process of materialistic life. According to Buddhist philosophy, there is only void after the completion of this material life, but Bhagavad Gita teaches differently. Actual life begins after the completion of this material life. For the gross materialist, it is sufficient to know that one has to end this materialistic way of life. But for persons who are spiritually advanced, there is another life after this materialistic life. Before ending this life, if one fortunately becomes Krishna conscious, he attains the states of Brahma Nirvana. There is no difference between the kingdom of God and the devotional service of the Lord, since both of them are up on the absolute plane. To be engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord is to have attained the spiritual kingdom. In the material world there are activities for sense gratification, where in the spiritual world there are activities of Krishna consciousness. Attainment of Krishna consciousness, even during this life, is immediate attainment of Brahman. And one who is situated in Krishna consciousness has certainly already entered into the kingdom of God. Brahman is just the opposite of matter. Therefore, Brahmi Sthiti means not on the platform of material activities. Devotional service of the Lord is accepted in the Bhagavad Gita as a liberated stage. Therefore, Brahma Sthiti is liberation from material bondage. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has summarized the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita as being the contents for the whole text. In the Bhagavad Gita, the subject matters are Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. In the second chapter, Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga have been clearly discussed, and a glimpse of Bhakti Yoga is also being given as a context for the complete text. So, interesting or important in this regard is Srila Prabhupada's statement that there is no difference between the kingdom of God and the devotional service of the Lord. So if we are in full consciousness engaged in devotional service, we are in the kingdom of God. That, like when Srila Prabhupada came to the West, he created everywhere Vrindavan atmosphere. He never left Vrindavan with his consciousness. So since both of them are on the absolute plane, both of them, the kingdom of God and activity in Krishna consciousness, to be engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord is to be attained the transcendental kingdom. That's the end of chapter 2. And now we will go to chapter 3. First, I want to give you a little review of this third chapter. So in chapter 3, we have 4 parts. The first part, which we will discuss today, the question there is renunciation or work in devotion. This is a theme which will be discussed in the beginning of the 5th chapter, in the beginning of the 18th chapter. Arjuna will bring that up again, this point. And it's an important discussion that's going to the whole Gita. Renunciation or work in devotion. Because Arjuna does not want to fight. He has heard about Jnana, and then Buddhi Yoga, that's also the yoga of knowledge, and he thinks this knowledge means renunciation, that not working. Renunciation, not working. But work in devotion is work in a spirit of renunciation, in perfect renunciation. And Arjuna does not connect that. We will see. That's so. And then karma yoga. Chapter 3 is about karma yoga. And because of the end of this first section, the conclusion will be that all activities should be done for Vishnu as a sacrifice. And that will, and if one does that, one acts in perfect renunciation, that in Krishna consciousness. Then karma yoga is explained, so many aspects, so many divisions of sacrifice, ways of doing sacrifice. Karma yoga, why doing it? That's to set an example. But the greatest problem is to come to that point of the reason why to perform this karma yoga is to become free from lust. Lust and anger is the greatest enemy of the consciousness. But by karma yoga, one becomes purified. Karma yoga is a sacrifice. In the 4th chapter then, the sacrifice will be further explained. Because this sacrifice will lead to purification and to the transcendental knowledge. Chapter 4 is called Transcendental Knowledge. Chapter 3 is about Karma Yoga. Chapter 5 is also about Karma Yoga in more detail. But now we will go to the first lesson, And we will deal only today with this in the time that we have left with this discussion, the renunciation of Lord in the devotion. So in the second chapter we have heard about different paths. That we have heard about Jnana Yoga or Sankhya Yoga, the same, and Buddhi Yoga, controlling the senses by intelligence, by transcendental knowledge, by engaging them in Krishna's service, by engaging them without fruitive desires. That's Buddhi Yoga. Karman evadakara stema fudesha kachina. One should do one's duty, Krishna says, but one is not entitled to the fruits of one's actions. Without attachment to the fruits, that's Buddhi Yoga. And in its perfection, that is done by doing everything for the pleasure of Krishna. Then automatically you are not attached to the fruits. But Arjuna has heard about Buddhi Yoga, and Buddhi means intelligence. So intelligence, and Krishna has said, Durene Yavaram Karma, one should avoid abominable activities. And Arjuna thinks, yes, this fighting, that's an abominable activity. I don't want to do it, that's right. So he has misunderstood it, and he thinks that's the reason Buddhi Yoga must mean I should not fight. So it's ability. But this Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga, they are stages to come to Buddhi Yoga. They are just stages to progress towards Krishna consciousness, Bhakti Yoga. They are stages. But one can't go directly to Bhakti Yoga. And these stages, Shiva Ramaraj has written a book, a very interesting book if you want to understand more deeply Bhagavad Gita or certain aspects of it, certain aspects. That Shiva Ramaraj has a book entitled The Bhaktivedanta Purports. And there he explains how these different yogas go together. And he explains that Jnana Yoga, or first Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is action. Action with detachment. Not attached to the fruit, detachment. Action, detachment. And Jnana Yoga, there is no action. But there is cultivation of knowledge and detachment. Knowledge and detachment. Then Ashtanga Yoga, that we'll explain in the 6th chapter. Ashtanga Yoga means no action, but cultivation of knowledge, detachment, and meditation. Alright? But the complete yoga is Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga has 5 characteristics. It means action. Action in Krishna consciousness. In knowledge. Knowledge, who is Krishna? To whom everything belongs. And that's knowledge. Knowledge of the self, who am I? I act on the platform of the soul. Devotional service is the constitutional activity of the soul. It's detachment, because one does it for Krishna. It's a meditation on Krishna consciousness. And then the 5th characteristic comes, and that's devotion. After meditation comes devotion. Therefore it's the complete yoga. The others have a part of it. They are part on a ladder to come to Bhakti Yoga. But one can go directly to Bhakti Yoga. One does not go through this. But not everyone accepts Krishna and devotion serves as the highest path. So Krishna explains this in the Bhagavad Gita for all kinds of transcendentalists. Or whatever level we are, Krishna wants us to make advancement. And that's also something we have to understand as devotees. We are all on a different level. And we should accept that. Not trying to artificially to bring one immediately to the highest level. No, we have all our path to go and our level. And Krishna is very liberal in that, but he makes it clear. We heard about Katvanka. He immediately understood that the demigods, he was fighting for the demigods against the demons. And then he did a good job. And then the demigod said, whatever you desire, we will fulfill your desire. And Katvanka was a devotee and he was a little intelligent and he was asking a question first. He said, how long do I have left in my life? How long do I have still to live? And the demigod said, oh, just a moment. And he said, I don't want anything. He fixed his mind on Krishna. That was it. He was intelligent. But how to develop this intelligence, that's explained here in the 3rd chapter and in the 4th chapter, by purifying ourselves. So after hearing about jnana and yoga from Krishna, Arjuna misunderstands. He thinks, did Buddha yoga, that's like retirement from active life and practice austerities in a secluded place, that in reality that was an excuse of Arjuna not to fight. That's the reality. But sometimes neophytes have also that perception, that conception, like going in Srila Prabhupada's time. There was a devotee and he was going to chant 64 rounds, and he went to Vrindavan, went to Radhakund chanting 16 rounds, and devotees came to Prabhupada telling, oh, this devotee is there in Radhakund, he's chanting 64 rounds, that and Prabhupada did not comment, and then another devotee came, yes, and the devotee is chanting 64 rounds, and he wants to chant more, and he feels disturbed as the devotee is visiting him. He has to chant. but its renunciation did not last. There was also a case in Vrindavan, was a devotee, and he was diagnosed with a terminal disease. And he came to Prabhupada and said to Prabhupada, I'm going to die soon at this. So I just want to stay here and chant 64 rounds every day. And Srila Prabhupada said, okay, you do that. And Srila Prabhupada gave him Babaji initiation. He gave 2 Babaji initiations. Many do not know that. But after that, he did not do that anymore, and you will understand the reason, because the devotees was chanting for some time, 64 rounds, but then it started to diminish. And then he went again to the doctor, and appeared the doctor had made a mistake. He was not going to die. He took the airplane back to America, and he was living again with his girlfriend. Anyway, it was just a farce. But this sudden renunciation, it cannot be done, because that's at the level of sannyas. One is purified in heart, and one is purified in heart, then one can do that. But artificially renounce, not possible. So the Srila Prabhupada explains that in the purport. Sometimes neophyte devotees also have that misconception that Krishna consciousness means chanting in a secluded place. Then Srila Prabhupada says the only gain from such practice is cheap adoration from the innocent public. Is a quote about that. In Vrindavan you find so-called devotees of Krishna living in seclusion and supposedly chanting Hare Krishna. In practice it has been seen that such an artificial way of trying to become Krishna conscious does not make anyone advanced. They live in a secluded place and chant Hare Krishna, but when they come out they are smoking. They cannot give up tobacco, let alone the other enticements of the material world. When you become mature, then you may wish to try living in seclusion. Maya is everywhere, and she will tempt you with, for example, tobacco. You will not advance while engaging in such nonsense. Valena parisisyate. In general, people understand that by retiring from ordinary life, one becomes spiritually advanced. This is being taught here, that by retiring from ordinary life, one becomes spiritual. No one becomes, but one becomes spiritual. In general, people understand that by retiring from ordinary life, one becomes spiritually advanced. That is being taught here, but it's not like that. Krishna taught the whole world that Arjuna was a soldier, was a fighter, and even by fighting, by carrying out his prescribed duties, it can be Krishna conscious. Now we have text 2. Page here. 3:2. My intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Therefore, please tell me decisively which will be the most beneficial for me. So if things are contradictory, then we consult with the spiritual master. And that's what Arjuna is doing here. Also, Srila Prabhupada explains it in a lecture. Sometimes things appear contradictory to the student. In fact, the master conversant in these matters does not say anything contradictory. Sometimes the student will misunderstand and think that they are contradictions. Therefore, students are advised to ask questions of the spiritual master, tat fidi. They should understand the transcendental science. First of all, surrender, then questions, then seva, service, surrender, service, and question. If you simply question without surrender and don't render any service, then you are simply wasting your time. Because that will be explained in the next chapter. The way will be explained how to receive transcendental knowledge and be able to realize it. Yes.
What does equivocal mean?
Equivocal? That I think equivocal means instructions that can be interpreted in two ways. Not clear, unclear. No, that's the meaning in the context here. What's the meaning in the dictionary may be different. But
Open to more than one interpretation.
yeah, open to. Yeah. Good. Thank you. Good. Then we have text 3. Text 3 is very interesting. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, as sinless Arjuna, I've already explained that there are two classes of men who try to realize the self. Some are inclined to understand it by empirical philosophical speculation, and others by devotion and service. So we see these two yogas. We are speaking about Jnana Yoga and Buddhi Yoga or devotional service. So one is the practice of religion and the other is the philosophy. So now what's explained here is that both should be combined always. You cannot have a religious practice which is not based on knowledge. It must be based on transcendental knowledge. Both should be there. If there is only a religious practice and no knowledge, that's religious fanaticism. And when there is only philosophy and no religious practice, that's just dry speculation. So both should always be combined. That's what Srila Prabhupada, they are interdependent. Both yogas are interdependent as religion and philosophy. Religion without a philosophy is sentiment and sometimes fanaticism, while philosophy without religion is mental speculation. So Bhagavad Gita is a scientific combination of this philosophy and Srila Prabhupada says religious, ritualistic processes. It's a combination, and he speaks about it in a lecture, Los Angeles in '68. There are certain classes of men who simply philosophize, and these are certain classes of men who simply blindly follow religious ritualistic processes. The Bhagavad Gita is a scientific combination of both. You should be religious, but you should also understand everything philosophically. Otherwise, one becomes a religious fanatic. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is clearly said that Chaitanya Randayara Kata Karapicha. You people try to understand the gifts of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by your philosophical understanding, not blindly, philosophically. If you are actually wise, then you'll find it sublime. If you simply stick to your own religious ritualistic principles without trying to understand the philosophy of everything, then you'll become a fanatic. So we should not become religious fanatics, not mental speculators. Both these classes of men are dangerous. Srila Prabhupada is hearing many Hindus to ritualistic practices, but if you ask them, what's the meaning? That's problematic many times. So, and Srila Prabhupada says, they cannot make any advancement. You should be religious and also try to understand each and every line philosophically. We have seen many such philosophical speculators. They simply talk in the meetings, and that's all. And if you examine their private character, it is less than ordinary. A person may be a nice speaker, but will that help you in your character, in your spiritual realization? On the other hand, if you chant Hare Krishna, it will give you immediate results. That I will read a part of this book. In the previous chapter, in the second chapter, verse 39, the Lord explained two kinds of procedures, namely Sankhya Yoga and Karma Yoga or Buddhi Yoga. In this verse, the Lord explains the same more clearly. Sankhya Yoga, or analytical study of the nature of spirit and matter, is a subject matter for persons who are inclined to speculate and understand things by experimental knowledge and philosophy. The other class of man work in Krishna consciousness, and it is explained in the 61st chapter of the second chapter. The Lord has explained also in the 39th verse that by working by the principles of Buddhi Yoga or Krishna consciousness, one can be relieved from the bonds of action, and therefore there is no flaw in the process. The same principle is more explained in the 61st verse, that this buddhi yoga is dependent, is to depend entirely on the Supreme. And in this way all the senses can be brought under control very easily. Therefore both yogas are interdependent, as religion and philosophy. Religion without philosophy is sentiment, or sometimes fanatism, while philosophy without religion is mental speculation. The ultimate goal is Krishna, because the philosophers were also sincerely searching after the absolute truth, come in the end to Krishna consciousness. Now text 4. Not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. So, here, Krishna explains just taking sannyas without purification of the heart is just a disturbance. Because one cannot get freedom from reaction, that one cannot attain perfection. So, to understand that, one must understand the meaning of real sannyas. Now, many times we think sannyas renounced, but what does it mean, that renunciation? One should understand the real meaning of sannyas, and that's explained here by Srila Prabhupada in the lecture in Los Angeles. Some of our students went to a well-known Swami here in New York and had found that he was smoking. A student said, "Swamiji, we don't smoke," and he was ashamed. So what is the use of taking this kind of sannyas? Sannyas means to give up material contaminated activities for the sake of the Supreme Lord. That is called sannyas. Sat, nyasa, sannyas. This is the combination. Sat means the Supreme, the ever-existing, and nyas means renunciation. That means one has renounced everything for serving the Supreme. It's a real sannyas. I repeat this sentence because that's the definition. That means one who has renounced everything for serving the Supreme is a real sannyas. So the sannyas means using one's body, mind, and senses in the service of Krishna. Action. That's the real sannyas. How he dresses, it doesn't matter. And the one who has sacrificed his life for the service of the Supreme Lord is a sannyasi. So, because this renunciation for the soul, it's artificial. Because now Krishna explains, soul means consciousness and desire, always active. Everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. So, as soul we are by nature active. We must work in Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, we will work under the dictations of Maya. There's nothing between. I work for Krishna or I work for Maya. That's, Srila Prabhupada, a few quotes. We saw a signboard in the Yoga Society in Los Angeles that said, "You become silent and you'll become God." And here Krishna says that you cannot become silent, even for a moment. Very interesting. It's directly against the instructions of Krishna. And, yes. You'll find in India many saintly persons who observe silence. Prahlad Maharaj says it is for the Achitandriyanam. this process, mana, to remain silent, is meant for persons who cannot control the senses. It is better not to talk than to talk rubbish. Many people think they will advance by not talking. If you ask a question, then they reply in writing. What is the difference between talking and writing? It is all sense gratification. And the fact is, you cannot stop the tongue working. Engage the tongue in Krishna consciousness only, and do not talk material subject matters. That is clear. Now, verse 6 speaks about the Mithyachara, the pretender. The pretender is going to renounce externally, but internally is meditating on enjoyment. That's the Mithyachara, and Krishna condemns that says, one who restrains the senses of action but whose mind dwells on sense objects certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender, a Mithyachara. So one who pretends I'm a yogi, but inside is making plans for sense gratification and plans for sense gratification, profit calculation for the body. That Krishna says he's the greatest cheater, although he may teach meditation, yoga and philosophy. Since his mind is impure, the effect of his knowledge is stolen by the illusory energy of the Lord. Thus his teachings has no spiritual value. The one who does not control his senses, does not follow the four related principles, he cannot speak on spiritual subject matters. It will not touch the heart of the hearer. It has no power whatsoever. Because that's the test of spiritual advancement, that one stops this plan making for sense enjoyment, does not meditate on anything in this world for the satisfaction of his own senses. Now, we may or we may not be a Mithyachara. We cannot control our senses. That does not mean that we are a Mithyachara. That important is for us that we do not desire it, we do not want it. You may even lose control over your senses, but you do not want to lose control. So desire is very important. But if the desire is going away and you cultivate a desire to secretly enjoy it, then you are Mithyachara. And Krishna says that's not good. Then better than that is this set in text 7. On the other hand, if a sincere person tries to control the active senses by the mind and begins karma, yoga and Krishna consciousness, it is without attachment is far superior. So even if we are a neophyte and we fail sometimes, but we try to serve Krishna, and that we are much better than this Mithyachara. So trying to control the mind by bhakti yoga, it's much better than this trying, than these yogis who are seated and try to enjoy secretly. That's on text 8. 7. Okay. On the other hand, if a sincere person tries to control active senses by the mind and begins karma yoga, without attachment is by far superior. Now text 8. Performing a prescribed duty for doing so is better than not working. One cannot even maintain one's physical body without work. I will read the first 4 lines of the purport. There are many pseudo-meditators who misrepresent themselves as belonging to high parentage, and great professional men who falsely boast that they have sacrificed everything for the sake of advancement in spiritual life. Lord Krishna did not want Arjuna to become a pretender. Rather, the Lord desired that Arjuna perform his prescribed duties as set forth for Kshatriyas. So, that's clear. Krishna wanted Arjuna to do his duty and fight and engage his mind, body, mind and senses in his service. Now text 9. Text 9 is like culmination of all this knowledge, of this section. The conclusion says, Jajnata karmano yatra loko nityam karma bandhana tataktam karma kanteya mukta sangrachana. Work done as sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work goes with bondage in this material world. Therefore, son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction. In that way, you will always remain free from bondage. So, that's the solution. That's action in Krishna consciousness. It's action in a perfect pronounced way. So it's renunciation and it's action at the same time. And that was Arjuna's problem. He could not combine that together. But here Krishna explains the combination very clearly. And he says, when you do that, then you are acting out of this world. You will not get reactions. We will learn in the 4th chapter more in detail. This is akarma. No karma is produced. There is no result on the material platform. There is a result on the spiritual platform by acting in that way. This sacrifice, if we do that, we will get knowledge, become purified, and real knowledge. We will get realization of the transcendental knowledge. And that will be explained, this sacrifice and that getting knowledge more deeply in the 4th chapter. So here, the art of doing work in Krishna consciousness is explained, that it should be done, as will be explained in the 4th chapter, under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master. So all sacrifices, they are meant to satisfy Vishnu. The whole Varnashram system, it's in the Bhagavatam explained, is meant for Haritoshana, pleasing the Supreme Lord. If one acts in Krishna consciousness, one has no reaction of one's work on the material platform. So, this is the end of our section today. So the 3rd chapter, beginning of the 3rd chapter. Thank you very much. What's the time? Does anyone have an urgent question? Yes?
In the verse 2.13, the word is Yatha Dehantar Prapti.
Which verse?
2.13. 2.13.
2:13.
2.1, chapter 2, verse 13.
Yeah.
Second line, Yatha Dehantar Prapti.
Yeah,
That means soul is moving from one body, one soul to another soul.
Another body.
And
From one body to another body.
one body to another body.
Yeah.
Soul is moving from Dehantar.
Yeah.
But in 2.24,
224.
Chapter 2, verse 24.
Yeah.
2.24. The word is, the soul is immovable, achal.
The soul is,
Immovable.
yeah, it's everlasting,
Nitya sarvada,
unchangeable, immovable, and eternally the same. Yes.
immovable. So how can we say that it is movable?
Immovable?
It is immovable. As per verse 2.24, it is immovable.
But then the
How
other
does it move
verse,
from one body to another if it's immovable? That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah. It's immovable because you cannot go out of your body. That, but it's under the control of the super soul. Super soul will move the whole subtle body maybe to its next destination. Yeah, I don't know the deeper meaning of immovable there. Some research could be done there. But immovable does not mean that it does not move from one body to another. And it will transmigrate from one body to another. Because Krishna explains transmigration in the 15th chapter very clearly, verses 8, 15, 8, 9, I think. That's clearly explained how it works. Yes, immovable. I don't know if Srila Prabhupada says something in the...
Krishna is also mentioning to Arjuna that he cannot move it. He's telling Arjuna to fight, and that Arjuna can't move that soul.
Yeah.
Not that the soul doesn't move from one body to another.
right, because when you say something immovable,
I mean, by somebody, yeah, physically.
That Arjuna can't move it though. He's
Yeah.
talking that we can't move it. He's saying kill them, don't worry, fight.
but it can move by its own
It can move because it's under the control of the Supreme Lord.
Super soul moves.
But Arjuna can't move it.
Yeah,
You can't move
right.
my soul, but my soul will move.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, thank you very much. Let's see you hopefully on Sunday or next Monday.
Yes.